The Time Machine 1960 is the film that invented the modern time travel movie, a Victorian adventure into a terrifying future where humanity has split into prey and predator. But even after 6 decades, this film is still hiding secrets. Did you know the original story ended with the hero vanishing forever, never to return? Or that the iconic time machine prop was found rotting in a thrift store for $1,000? Today, we're uncovering 18 hidden truths about the Time Machine 1960, including shocking Easter eggs that reveal a secret connection to the Forbidden Planet and Star Trek universes. Number 1. The alternate ending that was scrapped. In the film's final moments, George returns to 1900 and shares everything he's witnessed. His guests leave, skeptical of his story, but his loyal friend Philby lingers behind. Then, quietly, George slips away once more, this time taking 3 books with him, presumably to help the Eloy rebuild their civilization. But this ending doesn't exist in H.G. Wells's original 1895 novel. In the book, after escaping the Morlocks in the year 802,701, the time traveler never returns home. Instead, he journeys millions of years further into the future, where he witnesses the slow death of Earth, a desolate, blood-red beach beneath a swollen, dying sun where giant crab-like creatures are the last remaining life forms. The air is thin and freezing, and the ocean lies completely still. Director George Pal acknowledged that this sequence existed and had intended to film it, but budget constraints became the main obstacle. He later expressed regret, saying he could vividly imagine Rod Taylor and Yvette Mimieux standing alone on that lifeless shore, believing it could have been a very interesting story of the loneliness of these 2 people. Number 2. Forbidden Planet is hiding in plain sight. In the year 802,701, George visits an ancient museum to learn what happened to civilization. But if you look carefully at that scene, you'll spot something strange. The large acrylic globe sitting in the background of the Talking Rings room is actually the navigation sphere from the bridge of the C-57D spaceship in Forbidden Planet, released just 4 years earlier. And that's not the only piece. During the 1966 nuclear war sequence, the gray flight suits worn by the Civil Defense Air Raid Wardens are the crew uniforms from that same Forbidden Planet starship. Both films were MGM productions, so the studio simply recycled props between movies. But the unintentional result is that the time machine's far future literally contains artifacts from another science fiction universe. Number 3. The lava that made everyone sick. One of the film's most dramatic sequences shows molten lava engulfing the streets of London after a nuclear strike. To create this effect on a tiny budget, the special effects team, led by Gene Warren and Chang, came up with an ingenious solution. They would use oatmeal dyed red and orange poured slowly over a miniature London set. They prepared a massive batch of oatmeal days before the scheduled shoot. But then a heat wave hit Southern California over the weekend, and the oatmeal fermented. By Monday, it had lost its thick, lava-like consistency and reeked so badly the crew could barely stand near it. But there was no budget for a do-over. The miniature set was built and ready, the schedule was locked, so they rolled the cameras on the stinking, runny oatmeal anyway. That improvised disaster helped win the film the Academy Award for Best Special Effects. Number 4. It was almost a Japanese film. Before MGM ever greenlit the project, the film nearly took a completely different form. In 1958, Japanese producer Shiro Kido approached George Pal about co-producing The Time Machine with Shochiku Productions. This was during the golden age of Japanese science fiction filmmaking, right in the middle of Toho's Godzilla era. Had the deal gone through, we might have gotten a radically different version of the story, potentially with Japanese locations, actors, and Toho-style practical effects. But Kido eventually left the project, and no Hollywood studio would touch it either. It was only when Pal traveled to England to film Tom Thumb that he befriended the head of MGM's British studio, who helped him secure the modest budget that finally brought Wells's story to the screen. Number 5. The man who built the Morlocks also built the tricorder. Chang designed the look of the Morlocks, those terrifying underground creatures with their green latex skin and glowing electrical eyes. He also physically built the time machine prop itself, translating Bill Ferrari's designs into a functioning piece of cinema history. But what most people don't realize is where Chang went next. After the time machine, Chang and his company Project Unlimited moved into television. He became one of the most influential prop designers in science fiction history, creating the original Star Trek tricorder, the communicator, and the Romulan warbird from the episode Balance of Terror. The man who built the most iconic time travel device in cinema also built the most iconic communication device in television. Number 6. The actress who lied her way in. Yvette Mimieux, who plays the gentle Eloy woman Weena, had never acted in a film before. During her screen test, George Pal saw an innocent quality in her that he couldn't find in more experienced actresses. But MGM rejected her, and Rod Taylor, the film's star, wanted Shirley Knight for the role instead. Pal insisted, and Mimieux was brought back for a second test. What nobody at the studio knew was that Mimieux had lied about her age. She told Pal she was 18. She was actually 17 when filming began, which meant she wasn't legally allowed to work a full shooting schedule. But she did anyway. Taylor was skeptical, later describing her as kind of a strange hippie child. As it turned out, Pal's gamble paid off. Mimieux improved so dramatically during the 29-day shoot that Pal ordered her earliest scenes to be completely reshot to match the more confident actress she had become by the end of production. Number 8. Did George actually destroy paradise? Here's a fan theory that reframes the entire film. The Morlocks are terrifying to look at, but they're actually the only descendants of humanity who demonstrate real intelligence. They domesticate animals, they preserve old technology, they operate machinery, and they're building something resembling a functioning civilization after ancient humanity blew itself to bits. The Eloy, meanwhile, show almost no signs of higher thought. They don't read, they don't ask questions, they don't even try to save each other from drowning. They are, functionally, domesticated livestock who happen to look pretty. Then George arrives, teaches the Eloy violence, and burns down the entire Morlock civilization because it offends his Victorian sensibilities. The theory argues that George didn't save humanity, he destroyed the only working society left on Earth and replaced it with nothing. Number 9. The leading man was almost James Mason. George Pal originally envisioned a very different kind of hero for his time traveler. He wanted a middle-aged British gentleman, someone cerebral and refined. David Niven and James Mason were both considered, with Paul Scofield also in the mix. Any of them would have made the film a quieter, more intellectual affair. But Pal eventually changed his mind. He realized the character needed to be someone who could believably fight Morlocks with his bare hands. So he cast 29-year-old Australian Rod Taylor, giving the role an athletic, idealistic energy that none of the original choices would have brought. It became Taylor's first lead role in a feature film, and in a 1986 interview, he said he'd been asked more questions about this role than any other in his entire career. Number 10. A barber chair started everything. The time machine is one of the most recognizable props in cinema history, but its design started in the most unlikely place. MGM art director Bill Ferrari began with a turn-of-the-century barber chair. George Pal recalled that Ferrari thought it was a good foundation and then evolved it into a sled-like design, inspired by Pal's own childhood memories of horse-drawn sleigh rides in Hungary. The rotating disc behind the seat was Ferrari's idea to suggest motion through time, evoking both a spinning clock and a solar disc. Pal wanted the disc to spin one direction for future travel and the opposite direction for the past. But the mechanism was too expensive to build with a reversing feature, so in the finished film, the disc only ever spins counterclockwise. Number 11. George arrives on Columbus Day. When the time machine finally stops in the year 802,701, the date on the instrument panel reads October 12th. That's not a random number. October 12th, 1492 is the date Christopher Columbus first set foot in the Americas. The filmmakers deliberately chose this date so that George arrives in a new world on the exact anniversary of history's most famous discovery of one. It's a subtle but loaded choice. George is framed as an explorer colonist stepping into an unknown civilization, carrying the assumptions and values of his own world, ready to reshape what he finds. It's a connection that becomes even more uncomfortable when you consider what colonization actually did to the civilizations Columbus encountered. Number 12. Peggy Lee wrote a song that nobody heard. Before the film's iconic orchestral score, there was supposed to be a song. Peggy Lee, the legendary singer and lyricist, wrote a piece called The Land of the Leal, specifically for the Time Machine. According to David Duncan's original screenplay, the song was meant to play immediately after the opening battery of clock sounds, essentially serving as the film's theme. Lee had a working relationship with George Pal stretching back to the 1940s when she voiced characters in his Puppetoon animated shorts. But somewhere during production, the decision was made to drop the song entirely. No recording of it has ever surfaced publicly, making it one of the genuine lost artifacts of the production. Number 13. The growing tree that was actually a painting. One of the film's most magical moments shows a tree limb sprouting leaves and growing ripe apples as George accelerates through time. It looks like time-lapse photography. It isn't. Artist Bill Brace painted the entire sequence by hand on a single canvas. A locked-off camera photographed the canvas one frame at a time as Brace meticulously added each new stage of growth, leaf by leaf, apple by apple. The result is so convincing that audiences assumed they were watching a real tree filmed over weeks. In reality, they were watching a man paint. Number 14. The sirens never changed. Here's a detail that hides in plain sight for the entire third act. The sirens that summon the Eloy into the Morlock feeding chambers are the same air raid sirens from the nuclear wars of centuries past. Over 800,000 years, the original meaning of that sound, "go underground for safety," was corrupted into a Pavlovian trigger. The Eloy march mindlessly toward their own slaughter every time they hear it, because deep in their genetic memory, the sound still means "seek shelter below." The filmmakers used this to make a pointed statement. The very systems designed to protect humanity became the instruments of its enslavement, and the sound itself never changed. Not once in 800,000 years. Number 15. The Morlocks were professional wrestlers. The actors inside those heavy Morlock costumes with their green latex skin and grotesque masks were not traditional Hollywood extras. They were professional wrestlers cast specifically for their imposing physical builds and their ability to absorb punishment. Rod Taylor was an athletic actor who threw real-looking punches during the fight scenes. The production needed performers who could take those hits while wearing heavy masks with limited visibility and still keep going. It's one of those invisible casting decisions that makes the underground fight sequences feel genuinely dangerous rather than choreographed. Number 16. The melting Morlock was made of wax. One of the film's most disturbing images comes when George activates the time machine while a Morlock is clinging to it. The creature rapidly decomposes on screen, its flesh seemingly decaying over centuries in seconds. For a 1960 film, this was shockingly graphic. The effect was achieved by sculpting a wax figure of a Morlock, then blasting it with intense heat while filming. The footage was sped up to create the illusion of accelerated decomposition. The Morlock actually gushes blood from its mouth as it melts. It's a moment that was genuinely disturbing for young audiences at the time, and it still holds up as one of the most visceral practical effects of its era. Number 17. The sequel that took 32 years. George Pal spent the last 20 years of his life trying to make a sequel to The Time Machine. He submitted multiple scripts to MGM, and every single one was rejected. He wanted to finally film the far future Crab Beach and Dying Earth sequence from Wells's novel, the ending he could never afford the first time. Pal died in 1980 without ever getting his sequel made, but 13 years later, producer Arnold Leibovit made it happen on a small scale. The 1993 documentary short Time Machine, The Journey Back, features a 13-minute scripted scene written by original screenwriter David Duncan. Rod Taylor and Alan Young, who plays Philby, reprised their roles 32 years after the original. Taylor even brought the smoking jacket he'd worn in 1960. It still fit. The scene shows an older George returning from the far future for one last conversation with his lifelong friend. It was shot over 2 days on a soundstage in the San Fernando Valley, with the actual restored time machine prop trucked in from Bob Burns' basement. Number 18. The Fire That Erased History. Just over a year after The Time Machine premiered, the devastating Bel Air fire of November 1961 swept through George Pal's neighborhood and destroyed his home. Lost in that fire was the miniature time machine model, the small working version seen in the dinner party scene, where George demonstrates his invention to his skeptical friends. Along with it went other original production materials Pal had kept. The only reason any original Morlock masks survived at all is that Pal had kept one at his office rather than his house. He later gifted it to a young, aspiring effects artist in the summer of 1979. Less than a year later, George Pal was dead. Today, that mask is believed to be the only original screen-used Morlock in existence. The Time Machine is ultimately a story about one man's refusal to accept that the future is written. George doesn't just travel through time, he chooses to go back and change it. So here's the question worth thinking about. If you could take 3 books to rebuild a world, which 3 would you choose? Drop your answer in the comments. If these hidden truths surprised you, hit that like button, subscribe, and we'll keep uncovering the secrets Hollywood buried inside the films you thought you already knew.